kind of saying out, and then they had somebody analyze the photos and claim that they felt it wasn't authentic. Of course, had somebody like Jim Delatoso, who didn't have an agenda, who has both authenticated photos both from abduction and contact scenario cases. People like Wendell Stevens, who passed away recently, one of the few people in the UFO community that I respected for his work in the UFO research area, because he didn't have the agenda of suppressing the contact cases. He was willing, like the very famous Billy Myers case over in Switzerland. Well, MUFON and all these so-called well-known professional UFO investigators, and usually when they use that phrase, that's in itself kind of an indication of their real agenda. They come off as professional, but as I pointed out in this other show, if they were involved in a criminal investigation, they would totally flunk out all of the things they were supposed to do. They weren't professional at all. It was because their bias was causing them to put a spin on it, to suppress any reference to human-appearing ET contacts, benevolent human-appearing ET contacts. Well, they, in a sense, stuff the grays down our throats, the beings that have been doing all the abductions. And we also find out through much research that in recent years, under hypnosis, a lot of the more recent abductions under hypnotic regression that have been recovering memories, that there's usually some military person standing in the background overlooking these, quote, grays, which are really clone grays. And there's the military black op individual standing there making sure that the clone grays don't do something or some weird thing that contradicts the agenda that they're part of. The agenda being, it's my perception, the higher forces of the Astral Command have told me, that the government, because they duplicated the grays and the reptilians and some of these negative entities that are, again, very small in number compared to the vast majority that are benevolent. Nevertheless, as we know, the government made a deal with these grays to allow people to be abducted in exchange for technology. And it seems that this whole agenda to emphasize, to suppress any reference to beautiful, benevolent, uplifting contacts, and emphasize the terrifying, traumatic abduction scenarios, stuffing grays down our throats, the whole agenda. It wasn't so much that there was that much more evidence other than, say, implants in somebody's body. I noted that it seems to be some of these ufologists always tried to imply that it was a, traumatic experience with intense emotions, that somehow that was more believable than something uplifting and inspiring and that raised, that was inspiring and empowering. And I thought to myself, why is it that, are we so twisted that we think something negative is far more evidential than something benevolent, something uplifting that inspires us and gives us feelings of joy and love? Why is it that something negative is considered far more authentic in that context, other than, again, as the physical evidence of an implant in somebody's body? But there was a lot of emphasis placed on that, and putting down and ridiculing uplifting, beautiful contacts. And, a lot of these contacts, like if we go back to the 1950s, George Adamski's, where the six witnesses that observed him in the distance, and when the Orthon stepped out of the Venusian scout ship right there at Valley Center in the desert, they signed notarized affidavits. And most of these so-called professional UFO investigators totally ignore that point. Notarized affidavits in a court of law can put a person away for life, and is considered evidence in a court of law. But somehow that was ignored, because, again, the agenda was to explain away, was to debunk, was to ridicule, referring to them as part of the lunatic friends. This was what these so-called experts that in the late 60s, early 70s had started to to infiltrate the UFO community and create this agenda, again, to suppress contacts that are uplifting, benevolent, but to emphasize the abductions and the terrifying, negative, weird stuff. One of the agendas I've always seen that it seems to be so prominent is to attempt to make people who are highly intelligent, to make them feel beneath their level of dignity to be involved in it, to make it look weird and strange, and at the same time to emphasize the fear, to make people who don't understand it to fear the subject. This has been one of the agendas that have been ongoing for decades now. And in groups like MUFON and some of these so-called professional UFO investigators, again, this has been true that MUFON and some of the organizations like APRO and NICAP, the agenda has been for many years to emphasize, like I was talking about the situation in Mexico, when it's a sighting, when it's up close and it's hovering there, it's benevolent, and there's nothing negative going on, and somebody takes a very clear photo of an up-close ship, and almost every time they always say it's a fraud, it's a hoax. But if it's okay. But if it's a mysterious light in the sky, well, that's unexplained. It's a UFO, right? It's an authentic sighting, an authentic photo. This has been the agenda, and this is what happened as I did that show recently when Mufon went down there to Mexico, and Jaime, one of the well-known researchers down there, he was really insulted because to his face he said they thought it was authentic, but then later they put a spin on the whole thing and explained it away and said it was just some electrical circuit creating this effect in the sky, making these people out to be, really ignorant and stupid, and that was their whole agenda, because again there was a lot of contacts with human appearing ETs, and the sightings were up close, connected with a lot of the other sightings in Mexico. And, they had these so-called experts analyze and just totally explain it away. But that's the kind of agenda. And I had for many years heard about this, going back to when President Reagan was in office. This is a fact that 6 times, a couple of times before Congress, a couple of times before the United Nations, there was at least 6 times I've heard that he, in some of his speeches, he referred to the fact that what if we had an outside threat? Wouldn't we all tend to band together and look beyond our so-called present political differences as far as United States and Russia, Soviet Union, and the political differences that, put up walls and barriers? And this was in itself a reference, many people feel, including myself, that he had so little knowledge, not totally to the degree that others, highly covert agencies are able to, but he had heard certain things, and I think that's what he said this in his speeches, about the fact that this was kind of an intimation for what would be coming up in the future. As I said, my own contacts were referring to me that there would be a very strong probability of this, that the officials would use back-engineered covert technologies and attempt to fool everybody. And the people I started connecting with that were retired from covert agencies, intelligence agents, black op individuals that were beginning to break away, that they were beginning to become whistleblowers. And we have seen in the last few years thousands of whistleblowers now starting to come out through groups like Project Camelot on the internet, which is an opportunity for a lot of people to have access to in a way that they've never had before, and get it on the internet and get it out to the masses. So there is a lot of people waking up and having a peak of conscience and feeling like it's time to, and they feel they've got to break national security and tell the truth. And then I'd also heard reports about the fact that Werner von Braun, the few years before he passed on, with Dr. Carol Reisen, who was his assistant for about 4 years, shared key information with her because he had a peak of conscience. He felt that humanity needed to know what the power elite were planning for the future. And this was extremely important. Now, as I said in this recent show, a few shows ago, where I was talking about a report, I read this on the internet, and then there was somebody that sent an email anonymously to went by the name of Anonymous, that claimed to be in the military, that had observed the black op anti-gravity ships being tested, because there was a report in California. They reported this was a few weeks ago, a month and a half ago or whatever, that a triangular craft came down, and there were some civilian witnesses to it. And what I tuned in is the military didn't plan for this to happen, that there would be civilian witnesses. And in the channeling that is also posted at my website, channelforthemasters.com, in the channeled material section, I received a channeling communication from Ashtar, channeling transmission. He was commenting about this fact that this was one of the anti-gravity ships that they were testing, ultimately purposed to be used for a possible alien invasion, false flag, hoax alien invasion that the power elite wanted and still wanted and planned to do ultimately. Now, Ashtar said in this channeling that because of the energy frequency shift, planetary frequency shift that this planet's going through right now, that there is, and this has been discussed a number of times in the last recent years, especially in recent months, there's been a huge increase of frequencies, energies that have never existed in the universe before. The Ashtar and other Elohim have talked about this, that they're very excited about this, because these new frequencies that are manifesting around the Earth, which is going to force accountability on everybody. And it's also something that one of the beings that I channel, known as Voltra, who's a cosmic psychotherapist up there. And when I was growing up, I actually consulted him a number of times, and because of the incredible dysfunctional conditions that I saw the local, the people here on Earth engaging in. And I often refer to it as the Earth turns, like a cosmic soap opera, because it is, as Astra said, the most dysfunctional planet in the entire universe. So he often says, so cosmic psychotherapy is really good to utilize. So when I was growing up and I saw all this dysfunctional stuff, emotional conditions that humanity needs to process, he would come around me and help me get insight. Psychological analysis, emotional support to help me understand what Earthians are so caught up into because of a lot of mind control and genetic manipulation. This has created a lot of the problems, too, to try to numb and dumb us out and keep us suppressed. Or as I've often said, they only want us to be healthy enough to be good little worker bees, not healthy enough to rise up and challenge and overthrow the system, so to speak. But Voltaire gave a lot of insight. He once made a comment, and other beings Ashtar has repeated it. He once said that if spiritual integrity breaks down, then mechanical integrity will break down as well. In other words, certain things cease to function. And in regard to this, quote, conspiracy and cover-up of various different forms by the cabal, as we are now reaching the end of a cycle, and the beginning of a new cycle that's coming up. As a matter of fact, and this has been discussed in other shows, that we are actually at the end of 4 major cycles. One of those is a 26,000 year, actually 25,800 to be more exact, cycle that occurs every almost 26,000 years. And we're also at the end of a kind of semi-rare solar interplanetary cycle, in which the solar system is aligned a certain way, and also at the end of a very rare galactic cycle, in which the galactic system is aligned a certain way that rarely ever happens. And I guess to make it even more exciting, I have been told we're also at the end of a universal intergalactic celestial cycle. That has never happened in the universe before. I don't totally understand what that totally means, but it happens to be aligning with the other 3 cycles, and all coming up in 2012. December 21st, 2012 is when, and also when the Earth lines up with the galactic center. So all this is going on. An increase of frequencies. That has never happened in the universe before. New frequencies coming here that never existed. Also, another thing that's been mentioned in other shows, and it's really true, and because I've interviewed people like Andrew Bouchargo, who actually, as a child, traveled through time through a project called Project Pegasus, connected with Project Montauk. And but I understand it in a cosmic sense. I've been told that there is actually a group of those of us who are volunteers in Earth Embodiment. If you go to my website, channelforthemasters.com, take a look at that NASA Star People characteristic list. And most of the people I connect with through this work, through my transformational channel readings, that's one of the services I provide, because when I'm channeling, they actually have an energy beam on me from the Merkabah, the light ship. And they're actually downloading these higher light encodements that the Elohim, using consciousness technologies, can enhance our awareness. They can activate and speed up our DNA RNA activation. Now, they don't want to force help down our throats. They don't want to force things on us, but they're very passionate about helping us help ourselves. So when we call on them and ask them to intervene, they will be intervening ultimately in a more mass level. And so these encodements that are downloaded that are unique to each light worker, these 90-minute transformational sessions, and with with women, it's usually one of the goddesses, ladies, commanders, goddesses that will also, besides Ashtar, he usually comes in first because he's in charge of Earth missions for the volunteers. But one of the female beings will also come through and give a more feminine perspective. But while they're speaking through me, as I said, they have this energy beam on me, and they're downloading these higher light encodements that are put on the tape. So when you play the tape back, these enhance the natural process that is already speeding up by itself. The planetary frequencies are stepping up. But with the Elohim technologies, this can be stepped up even more quickly and enhanced even more powerfully. So that's one of the services I provide as a cosmic telephone.